Minister Akbar Mohammed from the Nation of Islam.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. First, I want to thank the coalition for organizing this event and those who traveled to be with us. I just want to say that she said the 10-minute rule before me because she knows that brevity is not one of my attributes. But I'm going to try to be short and to the point. Before I read a prepared statement, and there'll be copies that you can have, I want to just mention the newspapers today, and I'm not doing it to advertise the papers, but this move that Barack Obama has made against the sovereign nation of Libya has caused a divide within the country and throughout the world. Bryant, I want to thank you for your statement. It was very well stated, but what you left out is the amount of demonstrations in America and throughout the world. We talked about it. But Bryant could tell you about demonstrations across this country. And to make his point very clear, how many of you have picked up a newspaper and read about the demonstrations in Italy, in Pakistan, the demonstrations in the Far East, the demonstrations in France, the demonstrations in London, not just demonstrations against Gaddafi, but demonstrations against the United States bombing and talking about a regime change, and you haven't read it. The demonstrations across America. So, Brian, to make your point, the media has taken a position, and it is true that they have taken a position, and the position is to demonize Brother Muammar Gaddafi throughout the world. And being that the American people who stopped learning geography in school, they didn't know where Libya was until they put it on CNN and showed them a map. If you asked during the Vietnam conflict, show me Vietnam on the map, they could not show it to you. But the important thing to remember, the lesson of history, is that the Vietnam campaign in the streets, and Bryant, you said it right, if you take it to the street, you can turn it around. They had to come out of Vietnam because it had divided America, and the corporate entities of America were attacked because it was not a war for the liberation of people, but it was a war for the corporate greed of America. In the book that I reviewed on Press TV called Washington Rules, the man opens up talking about the last words of Dwight Eisenhower. And his last words and warning the American people, you have to be careful of the industrial military complex. Because everything, this war, when they look at the bombing of Libya, there are people sitting down calculating, as I stand here, how much it will take to rebuild it. When they went into Kuwait, $190 billion to rebuild Kuwait, and America got 80% of those contracts. So it becomes big business under the guise of a humanitarian move that we're trying to save civilians. So I just want to say, in today's paper, this is the USA Today, why Libya? No easy answer for Barack. Then there's the statement in the Wall Street Journal, and as I said, I'm not advertising these papers. But here, Carl Rowe did an editorial. And he said, and it's an interesting editorial, I just want to take one paragraph. Mr. Obama's problem is that his handling of the foreign policy challenge, like Libya, adds to his image of weakness. As the general rule goes, strong leaders get reelected, weak leaders don't. Okay, this is Carl Rowe. Then today, you got to get the New York Times, because I don't know if it was a slip of the writer, or let me read what the writer said. He talked about a general who recently retired from the Air Force, top intelligence officer, said that Libya's flat desert terrain and the clear weather has allowed warplanes with advanced sensors to hunt Libyan armored columns with relative ease, day or night, without the need of extensive direction from American troops on the ground. That's what he said. And this is in today's New York Times. So I want to take a minute and read my statement. And before I read it, I just want to mention President Museveni, His Excellency President Museveni of Uganda, someone that I know, wrote what has gone all over the world and it's basically a balanced article, but he left things out. He showed how he marginalized the help that Gaddafi gave him to put him in power. Now, I respect what Museveni has attempted to do for the Ugandan people, but I know that in the African Union struggle, he's one that doesn't want to see an African Union. He belongs to the Go Slow group, and Brother Gaddafi is the one who is saying we must do it now in order for Africa to survive. And so Museveni has challenged him every step of the way about the African Union moving towards a United States of Africa. So Museveni opens up, and most of you have seen this piece, a picture of him and a picture of Gaddafi, and he opens up and he critiques Gaddafi as the movement went on. And he mentioned that they gave us a few weapons, very small. But I know he should have said that my soldiers were trained in Libya, that Gaddafi financed it. And without his money, when we took power, we could have never made it. On Kololo Hill, in the beautiful capital of Kampala, sits a beautiful mosque that they could never finish. And 2 years ago, Gaddafi went there, finished that mosque, and the Muslims there wanted to name it the Muammar Gaddafi Mosque of Uganda. And so the money that he has invested in Uganda, I'm taking Uganda alone, says that if I'm going to critique my brother, then I must be balanced, because my brother, who suffered through a lot, aided me that I've been in power for 20 years in the country of Uganda. Now I want to read my prepared statement, and I'm trying to stick to this time, okay? And there's copies of the statement for you. And I just want to say that this is being seen throughout the world, and many people that we emailed, Bob sent out, how many this morning? 50,000 emails, and plus the countries in Africa. You know, I lived in Ghana for 12 years, so we made sure that they got this so that they would look at this press conference, because this is a coalition against what America is doing in Africa. And if the world stands by in silence and watch America use the flimsy excuse it's a humanitarian move, when most of us know if you were concerned about civilians, why did you stand by when the Israeli Defense Force bombed Gaza and killed 1,400 men, women, and children? Why did you stand by when they bombed Lebanon and killed over 1,000 men, women, and children? Why did we stand by in Kenya when nearly 2,000 people were killed during an election and we didn't do anything? Humanitarian causes now. And you're worried about civilians. There's a civil war in Cote d'Ivoire right now. People are dying every day. But where's America saying either Gbagbo or Ottawa step down, and it's a humanitarian crisis and we need to send warships off the coast, or we need to stop it? Where are they at in Somalia? Somalia is a non-functioning government. People are dying every day. If it's a humanitarian thing and we want to save civilians. So it's hypocritical and it's naive for American people to be so gullible that they believe that we are so concerned about some civilians when we watch thousands die. The drones that are killing families in Pakistan, these are civilians. So evidently there's something wrong with this picture. The name of my paper is, Could Libya Be Barack Obama's Stone of Stumbling? Since the uprising in Libya, I have been attempting to write an article in response to the many people throughout America and the Caribbean that knows the Nation of Islam's long relationship since 1971 with Libya. And they asked me, they know we just left Libya. Cynthia McKinney was there with me. And we just left there at a migrant conference where Muammar Gaddafi was showing his concern with the African migrants in Europe who are suffering in the jails of Italy and Spain. What is happening? The Africans in the diaspora in Europe are suffering across Europe, and he had a conference that we attended. So many people throughout America and the Caribbean who are familiar with the historical relationship between the Nation of Islam and Libya since 1971. People have asked me, where do you stand? And for clarity of the current crisis that is unfolding in North Africa that includes President Barack Obama's bombing of an African nation. First, I am not writing this out of a dislike for President Barack Obama, who I defended in my writing and speeches. I am with millions of black Americans and people around the world who had tremendous respect for him when he was elected the first African American president. But on this issue, I fundamentally disagree with our president. The situation in Libya has been very fluid, making it difficult to precisely pinpoint what is happening from day to day. Furthermore, because of various agents and corporate media buyers, it is complicated to discern truth from falsehood. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan said it best: whenever there is war or conflict, the first casualty is the truth. Obama said that Muammar Gaddafi must go. The president's words contradict the U.S. position against getting involved in regime change. The U.S. led military intervention in Libya began in March 19 in a coalition of international forces of Western imperialists with a few Arab nations. The attack was described as a preventive measure against the potential humanitarian crisis that they claimed thousands of civilians would be slaughtered if Libya's forces under Gaddafi reached the eastern city of Benghazi, the stronghold of the opposition. It sounds like a noble reason for intervention. However, it is not consistent with what we see happening in North Africa and the Middle East. Since the Libyan problem arose, President Obama has been in an awkward position, sometimes being contradicted by his Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, and the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. Answering the question, what is our strategic interest in Libya, on March the 22nd episode on NBC's Meet the Press, the Defense Director Gates said that Libya is not a part of our vital interests. Appearing with Gates on the same interview was Secretary of State Clinton. She attempted to explain and tried to clarify his statement. I believe that Gates spoke what he believed to be true. However, it raises a question in the public's eye and the Democrats alike, not just the Republicans but the Democrats, and both of them are challenging what we are doing, and there's a divide in the country. I'm going to just skip through this. I got my note from my handler here. Other nations, as America, Americans ask, why does the U.S. want Gaddafi out of power and want a regime change? The people of America and the world are not buying the line that they want to save lives of thousands of people in Libya. Now, I'm going to just go to the last part. In Yemen right now, there's a civil war going on. People are dying in the street. I mentioned this in my paper that you can have a part. But I have not heard President Barack Obama said, Ali Abdullah Saleh, you need to step down. You have lost the confidence of your people. I haven't seen that. And the fact that now today in the paper, they're meeting with the rebels, those rebelling against Gaddafi. It wasn't a rose carrying roses and children demonstrated when it started on February the 17th. The first thing that happened, according to my reports, I was in Africa, is that they raided a police station, took weapons, and they took these weapons to fight against the regime, and the Libyans had no other course but to respond. I haven't heard that from America. So President Barack Obama is in a dilemma. And this move against an African nation, and Libya in particular, will hurt him in the long run, as it has already in Africa and Asia and throughout the world. If President Barack Obama is thinking about a second term and somebody convinced him that you have to do this to appear strong, it has done just the opposite for him, as stated in Carl Rowan's article. So we say this: there's much that Libya has done. And those African leaders, as when the sanctions were on Libya, they decided that they were hurting because they couldn't get the foreign aid and the money that Libya has pumped into Africa from its oil wealth. They decided to break the sanctions and fly to Libya. They stood up as men to say that these are unjust sanctions against Libya and its leadership, And we as African nations do not have to obey the sanctions of the UN. And they took their planes, they flew to CERT, and that's why there's a big hall in CERT called the Ouagadougou Hall, because they made this decision in Burkina Faso. So the same thing has to happen today, that the African nations who have benefited by the Libyan people pouring wealth into African countries, they must stand up to this unjust attack on Libya as a nation. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.